And it's very common to see people who have made an attempt at development, and because it didn't yield fruit fairly quickly, they've either dropped it or said it doesn't work. And what we have to all understand is development is the crock pot. It's not a microwave. It can take years, not even months. And I think we expect a tree full of fruit in 6 months. And it's like, that's probably a high expectation for development.
Welcome to the Leading Second podcast, a space to help church leaders thrive in the second chair. The Leading Second podcast releases every Thursday morning, so hit subscribe and share this with your team. Now let's jump into another episode for all of us who lead from the middle. Hello and welcome to the Leading Second podcast. It's our honor to have you. So glad you've made it to this space today. If you lead from the middle in any capacity, Leading Second is for you. If you find this episode helpful, we'd love for you to visit leadingsecond.com/podcast because there's a downloadable episode guide. We actually create one for every episode so you can use it for your own notes or use it with your team. We would be so thankful if you help make some noise about the podcast by sharing it with your team, or you can post about it online. And of course, ratings and reviews always help share the message about Leading Second. Well, today we have a treat. We have Phil Klein joining us from Focus 412 to talk about leadership development. So let's jump into the conversation.
Well, Phil, welcome to the Leading Second podcast. I am really honored and excited to have you with us today. I so respect you and your family and Focus 412. So thanks for some time today. I'm excited.
I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me. I love and appreciate what you're doing for the kingdom.
Absolutely. Before we dive in, tell everybody a little bit about you and your family, and then tell us about Focus 412 and how you all are serving churches.
Yeah, well, I'm married to Grace. We've been married for 6 years now. She's amazing, incredible, hard to describe how wonderful she is and what a miracle she is in my life. And we have 2 daughters, a son-in-law, and absolutely the most importantly, we have a 11-month-old grandson.
Yeah, I was waiting for that one.
Kind of just like everything else just disappeared, and my grandson has just become the apple of our eyes. So that's a cool thing. And, Focus 412 is, we are a team that of leaders that has decided to really become, second chairs and pull up alongside churches and church leaders. And we help churches grow. And we try to, the way we do that is to help them grow healthy. And it's through a coaching, training, consulting model with the framework that we use. And, it's just a mission to help grow the church, connect as many people to God as possible.
Yeah. I have to admit, I have spied on you for years. I adore what you all are doing, and in some ways have really tried to learn from what you're doing. You always have been so kind at conferences, and any times our paths have crossed over the years to share wisdom as two, organizations that serve the greater body of Christ. I just want you to know we respect you, and I'm so thankful for the little bits I've been able to glean and steal over the course of time. But you all tell us a little bit more about even coaching and you work with teams to develop culture and structure and such.
Yeah. We really, we focus across, when you're talking about a healthy organization, the focus is always going to be on, structure. It's going to be on staff, on people, and it's going to be on systems, like those things. And, and culture's a system. So culture's, a mainstay that kind of wraps around all those things. And from, teaching and leading and being a second chair leader, that there's a lot of things that happen, but at the end of the day, they all kind of really fall in those areas. And if you have a structure, if you have a structure that is clear and understandable, and relationally people know who does what, and how things work, and then you have systems that develop process, and how do we get the work done, if you will, and then really having a strategy, and then focusing around developing people and leadership, is really the secret sauce, if you will, of developing an organization. And
Absolutely.
then once you have those things, then it becomes about scaling those different areas over time as you do more and more good things. Requires understanding how to scale those good things.
That's right. That's right. Well, I am really excited today because we're going to have a conversation on overcoming the obstacles of leadership development. And I got my notes out. Like I'm ready to learn from you today, sir, because this is an area that is mystifying too many. And I think you share the passion with me. We want to help a lot of churches get this right. So maybe this conversation will just be a deposit toward that end. Before we dive into that, though, this is the Leading Second podcast. So I want to ask you to get us started today, just in your own words, share with us for a minute, why are healthy second chair leaders so vital to a thriving church?
Yeah, I think ultimately a healthy leader brings health to an organization, which brings progress. We're all looking to make progress. It's essential to be healthy, to have the right things inside of us and around us that are healthy and thriving, so people understand and the communication of what needs to get done, how it gets done, and what, kind of the target we're aimed for. And I think, health begets health, if you will. So
Yep.
that's what I sincerely believe.
Absolutely. I mean, I think I would almost go so far as to say, can you have a healthy organization without a healthy second chair team? I'm not sure if it's entirely possible.
Yeah, I think, if it is possible, it'll be a daily grind, right? Because especially at the second chair position, somebody has to be actively in the work, but also have the ability to look across the organization and understand both what the gaps and demands are and what they're going to be in the future. Because the farther down in the ship, if you will, you are, the more you're focused on what's happening today and tomorrow. And I think that's the other part that's really vital to our positions, no matter where you are. But it's even more important the higher and higher level that you're pulling your head up and looking ahead to know what things we should be building today that are going to be used for tomorrow: infrastructure, people, resource, strategy.
Yep.
If you're working on those things today for today's needs, you're probably in a real difficult position and not healthy.
Yep. Very well said, sir. Well, let's dive in on leadership development for a minute today. I think we can both agree that churches right now need more leaders. We need better leaders. This is one of the ways we level up our capacity as a church to steward the ministry and what God has given us. And I think you'd agree with me too that churches are healthier and stronger when they have a strong leadership development culture or pipeline or focus, however you want to characterize it. So why don't we dive in with this question to get the conversation started today? What do you see churches doing who are winning in leadership development? Those who have some mo in this, what is that looking like in this season of the church?
No, that's a great question. And, we've talked about this before. I think the things that are essential are that you have some level of culture of development, structure to define and communicate it, and systems for people to process development through and to work in those systems that develop people. And I think the people I see that are winning recognize that development and developing people isn't it's not great desire. I talk to people every day that are like, that get excited about it, think it's important, but it's not something that you can just talk to people about and cast great vision about and expect that they understand and know how to do that. So
Right.
I think having a culture to say, what is your culture of development? Would anybody really consider doing their leadership role or doing a function of that without bringing someone along beside them to mentor them and narrate what they're doing? Would it be normal for me to be going to do a leadership event and not take somebody along? What is our culture? How do we see development? And then structure is really, if I was to walk into your church or your organization and I was there for a short period of time, would I understand the structure of development? How are people developed? What's that commitment? How does it happen? I think people have to be able to see it and understand it before they're going to be able to process it. So what is the overall structure? And then the last thing is systems. You can't, again, you have to have some process. Some of us, we know by all the personality assessments and Enneagram and StrengthsFinder that we're all wired differently. And some of us have a much heavier natural wiring to development and others don't, but everybody needs to do it. So we all need systems to work in that help us and guide us on what is the framework of how we should be developing leaders around us.
So good. I love what you just said. If I walked into your organization, could I tell, how I'm going to be developed? That's a really great question, which maybe leads me to this one. A culture of development seems like it would really help us retain people who are builders. Because to me, if I walk in, I want to know that I can grow here, that I can thrive here. I mean, would you want to expand on that anymore? On the power of a culture of development? Because I feel like it's essential for our retention and stewardship of believers, of people.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think even if you have a if you will, a development program, and I can feel the effects of it. I think good programs, and if we take a page out of the professional development out in the corporate world, in some ways is very sophisticated, if you will, in some companies that I've worked in. And part of the sticking power of that, and the reason people stay, is they not only understand how am I being developed today, and that feels good, and it's helping my life, and it's helping my family, and both at work and outside of that, but where am I going, and what does that track look like? What does I call it the ladder, what does the stairs or the ladder look like? And it's not that we want to be climbers or striving heavily, but I think for good reason, people more and more want to know, where am I going and where is this going to lead? And I think if you can see the development path, because there's a structure, like if I'm a middle level leader, it's very, I think, motivating and sticky for me to stay with an organization if I can see that I could actually progress to be a very high level executive leader, and there's actually a formal path, if you will, to get there. And I have to do the work, but there's a structure that's set aside for me to participate in, and people that are believing in me and working with me in that area. I think that's huge, where a lot of times we focus on what do people need today and let's get it to them. And we don't talk about what this pathway looks like, which can be very, not only motivating, but it can be sticky. And so we're not just changing out leaders and training a batch and then training a new batch.
Yep. Totally.
Hey, Clark here. I wanted to let you know about a great resource that we have available for you. It's a leadership development space called Leading Second Plus. It includes online courses that help church leaders thrive in the second chair. We know there's a tension when you're leading from the middle, and that's why we've created this space for leaders just like you, who want to get it right for the pastor and develop their skills and just win in their role. You're going to be able to find new content regularly, anytime, anywhere, from world-class leaders. And you'll get exclusive content from our library. We're happy to offer a 7-day free trial if you want to take it for a spin. So if you want to find out more, you can go to leadingsecond.com to take your new step in leadership development. Now let's get back to the episode.
Let's talk for a minute about where we get stuck. So, when you see churches getting hung up in this area, whether that be a culture issue or a systems issue, kind of like we're talking about here, where would you say churches get stuck the most? What are the obstacles here toward having a successful and sustainable leadership development process?
Yeah, I think there's a couple areas. I think one is fundamentally a lot of people believe they don't have the chops, as my old music teacher used to say, they don't have the stuff for, like, I'm not a developer, so I don't, so it's, and I think development is, it's not simple, but I think sometimes we feel like we have to be a professional. We have to have, a lot of church teams are young. I work with, I work with lead pastors in their 20s, and so I think there's this fundamental humility, I guess, in, I don't know what I don't know, and I think that's good to be humble, but I also think it's good to know that you can still develop people, and there's a lot of things that we can help people with. And I think that's one thing. I think the other is I often see people, and it's very common to see people who have made an attempt at development, and because it didn't yield fruit fairly quickly, they've either dropped it or said it doesn't work. And what we have to all understand is development is the crock pot. It's not a microwave. It's not and it can take years, not even months. So it's, a lot of times it's a stay the course thing. And I think those two things, being intimidated that I don't have the stuff and I don't stick with it long enough to really see the fruit. And I think we expect a tree full of fruit in 6 months. And it's like, that's probably a high expectation for development.
I've heard it said there's no miracle grow for leaders. So the leaders you need today, you needed to be been working on a couple years ago, and don't we all get in that place? We get in that place where I need them now. And sadly, they're nowhere to be found. So what would you say then if a church or a pastor were talking with you and they feel stuck in one of those ways? What would you say to them to help them take a practical step to get unstuck, to move forward?
Yeah. I think, the first step is you make a decision to change where you are. It's like, where we are isn't okay. Where do we need to be? And I think taking an inventory of what things, step one is take an inventory of what things that you could think of that you're doing today. You may not call them development. You may not think of them as formal development. What things do I have today? And so you have this bucket of odds and ends from your organization. And it's not, don't think of what you do, think of what the organization is doing, meaning it might be somebody other than you. So now I've got this random list of things that I think might be helpful for people that has shown some promise. And for me, I'm taking a whiteboard or I'm taking an Excel spreadsheet or something, and I'm listing those things. And then out of those things, I'm saying, okay, if somebody was going to come in and be developed, what would the gaps be with what I have informally? And what one step could I take, or one thing could I take that has the most potential to have the best initial outcome to solve the problems in leadership that I'm currently and will have in the future. And we can get into that in more detail later, and I'm sure we will in our discussion. But at the end of the day, it's always going to be, what do I have? And overlay that with what a development pipeline should look like. And then picking your greatest gap or your most important gap, and then doing one thing. What one thing could we do? And that could be, hey, every Wednesday for the next 10 weeks, we're going to develop, some topics that we're going to start working through. And, get everybody together for an hour and a half and start training mid-level leaders, because that's our greatest gap. And I think it's to take a step like that, but then commit to, doing all the hard work it's going to take you for the next year or
Yeah.
two just to formulate a plan. But I think, I always like to see quick wins and to be able to put something together. So I think it's, you may have something you could put a little gas on that would be helpful to get everybody excited, and then
really
get a
good.
formal.
Really good. Okay, we're gonna go off-roading for a second. You get my mind working now. So we're departing from the prepared questions here.
All right.
Okay, so my experience personally in leadership development, and I've heard it described this way by many, is that it can feel like a bit of a brake pedal. Isn't it easier for me just to go and do the job myself? Why do I need to develop someone else? In other words, it can slow you down in the short term to sit and make a copy of yourself, when in reality, it's just easy to go do the job yourself. So I'm going to contrast two words, accomplishment and development, because I think we can see those at times as sitting at odds to each other. Would you agree that it'd just be so easy for me to go put points on the board and do this myself? Yet over the long term, I'm going to win more if I develop people who can do this instead of me or for me. So what would you say about that tension of accomplishment and development?
Yeah, you're so smart. It's huge. It's a huge thing. And I would say, you're not going to love this, but I got no argument for that. I always tell people when they ask me that question, I'm like, okay, you got me. Like, if you're going to do something once, you could go do it much quicker than than you could taking me along and showing me how to do it and developing me to be able to do it. So there is no answer for me doing this faster myself. The question is, do you want to do this yourself and by yourself for the rest of your leadership,
There you go.
Life? So it's like, if you think you're going to continue to do this, and this is the level that you've now succeeded your entire life to, you are never, whatever level leader you are right now, you have to stay there, because you can't vacate because nobody else. So in the short term, I always say you have to let some of the fires burn, meaning, well, if I take that time, then there's going to be this set of things I can no longer in this season do, because I'm taking that bandwidth and I'm working. And I always say, like, it's painful to watch those fires burn, and there may be some level of damage. Let's make sure it's not people, and it's not, we're not damaging people in the process. But at the end of the day, if something really has a little bit of singe on it, but you end up with, a couple great leaders, and you've replicated some things that now you've tripled your horsepower, you should be able to rebuild those things and launch way past that. So I think, it's one of those things that seems pretty obvious, but it's a typical paradigm of life until you actually get outside of it and see how, the self-reflection of saying, is that really what I want to do?
Do you want to do this forever? My word.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so simple and yet so haunting, sir.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about another tension. Because don't you think sometimes in church leadership, we spot someone and we see how this person could fill a function or role on our team. And so we want to develop them for our team and their contribution for the team. And certainly that is good. Certainly that is noble and serves the body. At the same time, that person could very well have ambition or aspirations of their own. And the second you start turning on the development switch in somebody and they start seeing God at work in their lives, God's very liable to speak to them and to stir up the gift on the inside of them. I mean, I've been a part of the same church my whole life, so 42-ish years now. And yet I realize that's really rare, and people are going to develop ambition or a God dream that might even take them somewhere else, whatnot. So are we developing people for us or are we developing people for them? Is it a bit of both? And how do we navigate that tension?
Yeah. That's so good. I think if we develop people for if we develop them for their potential versus their position, then I think I'll say it this way, there's very few people I can think of, and I've worked with a lot of people over a long period of time. I'm getting pretty old. And I would say very few people leave places where they're personally being developed for their leadership potential versus for this position that you want me to do really well. And it's like it's because we don't invest enough time in people that they're getting enough to do well at what they're doing. They lift their head up and they go, wow, I'm starting to get better at this stuff. What other things could I do in life? Where could I go? What other people need help? Which is not a bad thing.
Yeah.
But the people that stay in, and I know it's part of your story and it's part of my story,
Yep.
being part of organizations for a really long time, is I don't think about leaving a place that I am being challenged and I'm being able to apply my leadership. And it's not only affecting the specific place I'm at, the specific job I'm doing, but it's affecting my family, my
Yes.
community, the greater kingdom. And I don't feel any tensions in that because the person that's developing me and the organization I'm a part of cares more about me making a difference in the world than they do fulfilling a position there. And you know this part of it. Ultimately, we're not doing it because it's selfish, but if you're that organization, you're actually getting exponentially more from
Absolutely.
people because of that. It's a reciprocal thing. I come back and I'm like, I want to dig deeper. I want to do more. And so I think, I always beg leaders, like, don't be afraid to develop people, because let's face it, it hurts when somebody we've invested in leaves us.
100%.
And I always comfort them by saying, listen, when you hire somebody to replace that person and you get this amazing person, just realize somebody else developed them and you got, you're the receiver of somebody that got developed. So this is it's a carousel of reciprocating, kingdomship, if you will. And I'm just feel like my life is a testament to, I've done some really dumb things, meaning I've developed people and I've forced myself to do that without any notion of anything other than them being developed. It wasn't for my purpose. It wasn't for my organization. And God has blessed that. It doesn't mean they've all stuck around, but I wasn't doing it for that. And it's kind of the abundance mentality versus scarcity,
Yes.
right? And it develops this freedom in you. It develops a freedom in people. And, I think it's the trying to wrap your arms around it that most of the time is what suffocates people anyways. So,
Absolutely. That answer right there was worth the whole podcast for someone listening. And I'm just going to add a sprinkle on top with it by, Phil, I'm dying to have this conversation with senior pastors myself, because I've been blessed with a phenomenal senior pastor in my life. And I recognize I'm talking as a son of the house. I recognize I literally was born in our church practically, and I have a lot of years that go into what I'm about to say. But I feel like when I look back on it, one of the greatest things my pastor has done is he's kept the ceiling off of me. That when I got ready to jump, he said, let's do it. It wasn't without some tension at times. It wasn't without a truckload of conversation and communication. And to be quite frank, the more I've done with leading second, it's changed my contribution at home. I'm still involved, but it's different now today than it was. And, they've had to be selfless. I believe they also receive some of the benefit, too, hopefully. But I mean, it's been a dance, but I will just give them honor for the rest of my life because they kept the ceiling off. And to your point, it's the last thing you do is think about leaving that place, because I can thrive here. And I think I would want to say that humbly to pastors. I've not done your job, and I don't know the pressures and weight of pastoring a church, but I do know the second chair. And if you'll keep the ceilings off, I do believe there's so many that would run strong and run really long time, for that leader and for that church.
Yeah.
Let me ask you maybe one last question, because I could really talk to you for a long time about this, especially now we're going off road here. Here's maybe a question I'd have. So we empower someone to do a job, and it's messy at first. Like you said, there's going to be a couple fires that probably burn here or there. When do you step in and actually stop or guard against failure? Because failure can be a learning opportunity. Failure can be a powerful teaching moment. But then, of course, there's failure that can hurt the organization, hurt people. So when do you use calculated failure and let a new leader fail to learn a lesson? And when do you actually step in and guard it and not allow that to happen? I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. It does. And I think, I think too often we don't take a minute to kind of calculate the boundaries of any collateral damage that might happen if you're taking a big risk, for example, on someone that's a big lesson that might be learned, but also, could have some damage if it doesn't go well. I'm a big believer in those things can be planned out. And, it's like when I get in my car to go, drive to, drive to the store or drive to church this weekend, there are certain thoughts I have and certain precautions I've taken to make, I don't sit there and go, I don't think I should go to church because I may crash and die on the way. That's certainly it's certainly a possibility. There's a kind of unexpected, uncalculated, but I've taken certain precautions. I wear a seatbelt. I have a plan on how to get there. And, when pressed, I know what my limits are. I might, don't tell anybody this, but I might go 5 miles over the limit. And, if I was training someone to do that, I might, and developing them to do that, just like you would with a driving instructor or flight instructor, day one, they don't say, here's the yoke or here's the wheel. So it's some of it, in less words is a bit of practical common sense leadership. It's more not spending the time to go like, instead of, hey, I think you'd be great at this, go do that. I see a lot of that where it's like, have we thought through what the person who's doing that role is right now is going to think if you throw somebody in the middle of their organization, like what disturbance to the organization is this going to have? So I think just calculating some of those things up front. And I think, making sure that I also see that there's this, I'm deeply involved in your development, and then I'm putting you in a set of circumstances, and I'll come back to see you in 6 months or a year and see how you're doing. And if you're crashing, burning, I'll save you from the fire and hope you're not too burnt or the people involved are. And I get confused by that because I'm a big believer in, like, there shouldn't be any moment that, if you think about even now as a grandfather, my grandson's name is Saints, like I wouldn't be like pouring wisdom into him and then going like, I'll see you at your next birthday to see how that's doing. So I gave you this valuable stuff you need to work on, and I'm just going to let him, like I won't see him for years. And it doesn't mean I'm going to be in another deep session. It means I'm going to be checking in. I'm going to be observing. I'm going to be in the periphery. And so, real bad things can't happen. And if they do, they're quickly kind of scooped up and, nobody gets badly hurt. So, I mean, there's a lot to it, but that's kind of the things I think of.
Wow. I'm really encouraged. I was already passionate about this subject, but hearing what you shared today, I'm really encouraged and believe we're finding some handles for somebody. So thank you for your wisdom and your time today. I'm going to ask you one final land the plane question today before we sign off. And that's this: to the leader that's listening, they may or may not be able to start the leadership development pipeline of their church. That may not be within their line of authority, but they're sitting there, they're listening to this. They want to get started. They want to do something to develop leaders in their airspace, maybe in their department. Like, what would you say to that leader who just wants to get going today?
Yeah. I'd say, it's very important. I can't name very many organizations that do a great job at leadership development that don't have somebody on the team that thinks a lot about it, is incredibly passionate, and wants to champion it. They might not be in charge of it. There may be no formal position. I think of people like Larry Bry from Elevation, who
Yep.
is a hero of mine
Yep.
and a mentor of mine. And, I think of how development happened at Elevation. And I think, Larry was the champion and was always bringing it back to there. So I think even if you might be in the middle of the organization, you might be a second chair, you might be a third chair, you can have enthusiasm, you can bring awareness, and you can suggest solutions to how the organization might take a first step. And quite frankly, the last thing, because people say, well, I don't know anybody to listen to my solutions. How about doing one of them? So get together every Wednesday night
Beautiful.
and put together a small, simple thing, and invite 4 people and start banging away at it and see how it goes. And people will see that you're doing something, and somebody will say, man, that's really helpful for me. So I think be that champion, be that person who thinks about it, is passionate, and be prepared. It's, there's too many stories in the Bible where people, were prepared for a lot of years and then all of a sudden got called up, and you need to be ready and have a suggestion, have a solution, and be working on something. So I think, that's something everybody can do.
Amen. Amen. We will leave it there today, but thank you, Phil. I love and respect you. Thank you for your voice and who you are to the body of Christ. We're better because of you, and I appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate you too. And I thank you for doing everything for Leading Second. It's making a difference, and it's made a difference in my life.
Amen. Thank you.
It is our honor to serve churches and leaders across the globe. We equip ministry leaders with the coaching, events, and resources needed to embrace their calling, get it right with their pastor, and lead in an uncommon way. Visit our website, leadingsecond.com, to learn how we can come alongside you as you lead from the middle, from the second chair, for the second chair.